It's Powerback time on the Gutsy Podcast. Each week we bring you 5 minutes of condensed inspiration to reclaim the courage and momentum you've given away. You've got big things to do, so let's get your power back. This week's Powerback is about playing in the space of what if. One of the coolest things that human beings are able to do is to come up with new ideas. If you've ever sat in on a brainstorming session or a place where you're hearing a lot of new content and all of a sudden that kind of funnel stream of ideas start coming into your head, you know that you can get very quickly inspired and want to go 100 miles an hour. And just as quickly as you have been inspired, you become overwhelmed by the details of this very idea. You can very quickly go from feeling on top of the world, like you can tackle this, it's not an issue at all, your mind is set on it and you're going to do it, to being really overwhelmed by the, I don't know how to do this portion, I've never done this other part of the process before. This requires me to learn a new software and I don't know how I'm going to have time to do that. Or just something as simple as, I've never done this before and I don't really know what I'm doing. Therefore, am I even qualified to dream about this idea? What typically happens next then is it gets put in that pile of papers that haven't seen the light of day in the last 6 years. Or even worse yet, it plays on a loop in your head over and over and over. Nothing will kill a dream faster than starting with the logistics. Now, I know that there are all different types of personalities and mindsets, and I greatly appreciate logistical people. But just as there is a time to find out the details, there is also a time to just think big. Think about this. If you could visualize and dream something as if nothing were an obstacle, what would you do? I've trained my creative team on this concept because every single day we are playing in the land of ideas. And if we started off each conversation, each new brand story, each new idea with how we were going to even make things happen first, I can promise you we would have missed out on a lot of really cool ideas that turned into very lucrative campaigns for our clients. Just as a most recent example, today the team was working on event branding for an upcoming event that we are hosting. And before getting started, I reminded them, play in the space of what if. And what that means is, if you had no boundaries, what would you do? So they grabbed the floor plan, they grabbed the virtual tour, and they started brainstorming together. And very quickly, one idea rolled into another, and they said, oh, what if we did this? Oh, what if we did that? And then they came to me and presented it. They were like, there's some really kind of crazy things in here, but we played in the space of what if. And I absolutely adore that. They didn't get locked down into the details, how things were going to be affixed to the wall, how many of each thing do we need, what's the cost for each piece going to be. We're not in that stage yet. Right now, we're just being creatives. And the more you allow yourself the freedom to come up with something new, it's often the big crazy ones that lead us to the right ideas. So for this week's Powerback, I want you to stop howling your ideas to death and see what happens when you play in the space of what if. See, 90% of ideas die in the process of figuring out how to do something. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Ideation doesn't always need to be such a structured process. You could consider coming up with ideas on a whiteboard or a chalkboard. Some people like to create a mood board or a vision board. Sometimes people like to spend countless hours on Pinterest. I can say that I'm guilty of that. When you're headed into something that needs an idea, all I'm asking is that you don't corner yourself or put a ceiling on your ideas just simply because you're trying to figure out how to make them happen. Because the beautiful thing is, when you don't cap yourself, you can come up with some pretty awesome ideas that may even be better than the ones that you were trying to already figure out. A lot of times this is just changing up your environment too. So I like to think about it as finding your funnel stream. I get a ton of ideas when I'm away from all of my normal things, particularly when I'm driving down the road. I'm not distracted by things, and it's almost like the gates to the ideas just kind of pour into my head. The last thing that you want to do is to actually document this. So again, this could be something visual, something that you're writing or sketching. You just want it to be something that doesn't feel like it has to take up space and capacity in your brain all the time, that if you are able to mentally download it onto something that you can visually reference again later, you're less likely to forget some of those really amazing ideas that you came up with. And guess what? Now that you've got all these really amazing ideas out of your head and onto paper, now you can start putting action behind them. Now you can start coming up with a plan and going over logistical things like budget and time frame and materials and programs and whatever it is involved in actually making that idea come to life. Now you can figure those things out. You're saving time because you're not putting a lot of how-tos behind every single idea. You're investing your time more wisely into the best idea for you, your client, or whoever else is involved. Join me next week on the Gutsy Podcast as we dig into the concept behind branding yourself as an individual versus branding yourself as a business. Until then, follow the Gutsy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and for more business goodies and some real raw, candid shit about business, follow me on Instagram at @ThatLauraOra. See you next time.